My grandfather never let anyone eat with him. It wasn't some quirky old man habit, or at least that's what I told myself for years. He would sit alone at the end of the long oak table in the dining room, an empty chair beside him, his plate turned slightly away from everyone else's. We gather in the kitchen, my mom, my uncle, my cousins, laughing, clattering forks, pretending not to notice the door that stayed shut between us and him. But every night, I would hear the scrape of his chair, the wet sound of chewing, the little hums he made in his throat, like he was enjoying himself too much. Sometimes I thought he was talking to someone in there. Sometimes I was sure I heard another voice answer back. I used to tell myself it was just the house, the pipes, the wind, old beams settling. You tell yourself a lot of things when the truth starts pushing against the edges of your mind. If you were me, would you have knocked? The dining room was the coldest place in the house. Even in July, when the air outside was heavy and thick, you'd step past that doorframe and feel something chill bite the skin on your arms. He never let us in while he ate, and afterward, he always carried his plate out himself, his fork clinking in a strange rhythm as he went down the hallway. I never saw what was left behind, until the night I did. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what kind of man my grandfather was. He wasn't frail, not like you'd expect. He was tall, his back still straight, even in his late 70s. His hands big and calloused, like he'd never stop working. His eyes were pale gray, so pale they looked like glass marbles when the light hit them. He had this way of staring at you too long, just past the point where it felt natural, like he was, deciding if you were worth keeping. We lived with him after my dad left. My mom said it was just until things stabilized. But years passed and stability never showed up. I was 13 when we moved in, and by the time I left for college, nothing about that house felt like it belonged to me. It was his, always his, especially the dining room. You'd think I'd get used to it. The rules, the little boundaries. Don't go in while he's eating. Don't ask what he's having. Don't knock on the door no matter what you hear. My mom enforced those rules like scripture. She never explained why. She just looked tired, like the answers were heavier than she could carry. Still, curiosity eats at you. It gnaws at your bones. I remember one evening when I was 16. Everyone else was in the living room watching TV. I got up pretending I needed water, and I crept down the hall toward the dining room. The door was half closed, a pale sliver of light cutting the floorboards. I heard him chewing, slow, deliberate, and then a sharp scrape, like his fork was cutting through something tougher than food should be. And then something else, a laugh, not his, high, thin, and wet, like it came from deep inside a throat not made for laughing. I froze there, my fingers inches from the doorframe. My heart was hammering. My breath felt too loud, and then the chewing stopped. "Boy," my grandfather's voice said, clear as if he were right behind me, "get away from the door." I ran. He didn't come after me. He never even mentioned it later, but he knew. Somehow, he always knew. You'd think that would have been enough to keep me away forever. It wasn't. The older I got, the stranger his habits became. He'd spend hours in the basement, doors locked. Something heavy dragging across the floor. Once I caught a glimpse when he forgot to shut the door all the way. I saw stains on the concrete, dark ones, but it was always dinner that bothered me most. He never ate with us, not once. Birthdays, Christmas, Thanksgiving. He'd sit in that room alone, knife and fork working steady, while the rest of us tried to celebrate like normal. My cousins whispered about him at night. He's crazy. He's sick. He's a vampire. But none of them dared to look closer. I did. It happened last winter, just after my 24th birthday. I was visiting home, the air sharp with frost, the sky black early. My mum was asleep, the house quiet. Grandfather's door was closed, and I could hear him in there. That same chewing, that same awful rhythm. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was just going to bed. But my feet carried me down the hallway, softer than breath, until I was right outside the dining room. The smell hit me thirst. No food, not meat, not anything you'd call edible. It was sweet and metallic, like copper pennies left in milk. My stomach turned, but I pressed my hand against the door anyway. The knob was cold, too cold, and when I pushed it, just an inch, I saw the edge of his plate. Something pale, something slick, something that twitched even though it shouldn't have. He lifted his fork, his head turned, his glassy eyes found me, and he smiled. That's when I realized he hadn't been eating alone after all. I slammed the door shut before I could see more, before my brain could process what exactly was writhing on that plate. My heart was in my throat, hammering so hard, it felt like it would split my ribs. I stumbled back into the hallway, pressing my hand against the wallpaper, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. That it was a trick of the light. That it wasn't moving. But you don't mistake something twitching. You don't mistake a smile like that. I went upstairs and locked my bedroom door, the childish way I used to when I was scared of storms. I stayed awake all night, listening. The sounds carried through the vents, the scrape of fork against porcelain, the wet chew and swallow, the muffled hums that weren't just his voice. Sometimes higher, sometimes lower, like more than one person was eating. I thought about running, walking out of the house and not stopping until morning. But I didn't. Fear does strange things. It roots you in place, makes you wait. The next morning, I came downstairs like nothing had happened. My mum was at the sink, rinsing dishes. The dining room door was wide open, the table bare except for the plate he always used. Clean, too clean, like it had been scrubbed with bleach. He was at the head of the table, reading the paper, his posture stiff, his expression unreadable. He looked up when I walked in, those pale eyes flicking to mine, like he knew every thought I'd had while lying awake. "Sleep well?" he asked. My throat dried. "Fine." He smirked just enough for me to see the edge of his teeth, then turned back to the paper. I didn't eat breakfast. That day, I tried to talk to my mom. Subtle, careful. I asked why he always ate alone, why we weren't allowed in. She froze, her hands stilling in the dishwater, her shoulders curling, like someone had just poured ice down her spine. "Don't," she said. Just that. One word. Flat, exhausted. "Mom, I think something's wrong with him." Her hands clenched the edge of the sink. "Don't," she repeated, her voice breaking, softer this time. She wouldn't look at me. I wanted to shake her, scream at her, force her to tell me what she knew. But something in her expression, fear, guilt, I don't know, made me shut up. Made me feel like if I pushed too hard, the whole fragile balance of the house would crack. But once you've seen the thing writhing on his plate, once you've smelled that copper sweet stench, there's no going back to pretending. That night, I tried again. The rules didn't matter anymore. I waited until I heard his chair scrape, until the faint hum of his throat drifted down the hall. My body shook with every step, but I made myself move, quiet as I could, until I was back outside that door. I pressed my ear against the wood. There was chewing, slow, methodical, but not just his. Something else joined in. Something wet, a second rhythm, slightly off from his, like a child trying to mimic an adult. And then a voice, high and broken. "I'm hungry." I bit down on my knuckle to keep from making a sound. Grandfather's voice answered, low and calm. "Not yet. You wait until I say. I want it now. You'll have it when I'm finished." The fork scraped hard. A chair creaked. Then silence. I should have left. I should have backed away and pretended I heard nothing. But I couldn't. My hand found the knob again, slick with sweat. I twisted, slowly. The door opened a crack. Through that slit, I saw more than I ever wanted to. The plate wasn't empty this time. It was piled high with pieces I recognized in a way that made my stomach lurch. Too human in shape, too. Familiar in color. Pale and mottled, veins still visible. Fingers. He was cutting into one, chewing with those glassy eyes half shut in satisfaction. Across from him, in the chair that had always stayed empty, was something else. Small, thin. Its skin was gray and stretched too tight across its bones. Its face was long, its eyes black as pits, no whites at all. Its lips were wet, trembling, and split wide in a grin too sharp for its head. It licked its lips as it stared at him, and then it turned. It saw me. My breath caught so hard, I nearly choked. I shoved the door shut and stumbled back, slanting into the wall. The air burned in my lungs. My heart felt like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest. For a long second, I thought the door would open. I thought he'd come out, drag me inside. I braced for it, but nothing happened. The chewing started again, slow. Wet, unbothered, like I hadn't been there at all. I ran to my room. I don't know how long I sat in the dark. Hours, probably. My phone glowed in my hand, but I couldn't call anyone. Who would believe me? What would I even say? Hey, my grandfather's eating hands in the dining room with a thing that shouldn't exist? Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hall, heavy, steady, coming toward my room. They stopped outside my door. The knob turned, slowly. I grabbed the baseball bat from under my bed and pressed it to my chest, my breath trapped in my throat. The knob stilled, and then, through the crack beneath the door, a shadow stretched. Too thin, too long, the outline of fingers dragging along the wood. It stayed there for minutes, and then it whispered, hungry. I didn't sleep. When the sun came up, the shadow was gone. But I knew then I wasn't safe in that house anymore. I thought about leaving that morning, just walking out the door, backpack slung over my shoulder, and never coming back. But when I stood in the kitchen with my hand on the doorknob, I felt him. Not saw, Not heard, just felt. Like his eyes were already on me. I turned my head, and sure enough, he was there at the table, sipping his coffee, the newspaper folded neatly beside him. He didn't say a word. He just watched. I let go of the doorknob. Fear isn't logical. You'd think seeing what I saw would make leaving easier, but it doesn't work that way. It's like being caught in a spider's web. You think you can pull free, but the more you move, the tighter it sticks. That day passed in a blur. My mom fussed around the house, doing chores that didn't need doing, avoiding my eyes. I wanted to grab her and scream, you've always known. But I didn't, because part of me was terrified she'd nod. That night, I couldn't help myself. Curiosity gnawed deeper than fear. I needed to see again, needed proof that I hadn't lost my mind. I crept to the door. This time, I didn't even need to open it. The sounds were enough. 2 forks, 2 plates, the scrape of teeth, and laughter. Not the wet gurgle I'd heard before. No, this was louder, sharper. Like a pack of children giggling, except each laugh ended too suddenly, cut off in the throat. I backed away, shaking, and that's when I heard his voice. "Do you want some, boy?" It wasn't muffled by the door. It was like he'd whispered it directly into my ear. I spun, heart slamming against my ribs, but no one was behind me. The dining room door creaked open an inch, and for the first time, he stepped out before I could run. He filled the doorway, tall, shoulders squared. His hands were slick, shining dark against his skin, and his smile was too wide. "You're growing bold," he said, his voice low and steady, "just like your father." The mention of my dad hit me like ice water. "What do you mean?" His grin thinned. He wanted answers too. Answers are dangerous. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. He reached out and patted my cheek with that wet hand, and the smell that clung to me afterward was unbearable. Iron, rot, sweet decay. "Best you stop asking questions," he whispered, "or you'll end up like him." And then he shut the door. I didn't sleep again. My mind kept replaying his words. End up like him. My father had vanished when I was 12, just before we moved into this house. No note, no goodbye. My mom said he left us. That was the story we all clung to. But now I wondered, did he try to open the door too? The next morning, I confronted my mom. "Where's Dad?" She froze at the stove, the spatula trembling in her hand. "You told me he left," I pressed. "Did or did grandfather?" "Stop." Her voice cracked like a whip. She turned, eyes wide and desperate, tears threatening to spill. "You don't understand. You're better off not knowing. That thing in there? Don't." She lunged forward, clutching my wrist so hard her nails dug crescents into my skin. "If you love me, don't say another word." Her whole body shook, and for the first time I saw it, the deep, permanent terror etched into her face. She wasn't protecting him, she was protecting me. That night, I tried not to listen. I stuffed a pillow over my head, put on music, anything to drown out the dining room. But no matter how loud I made it, the sounds crept in. Chewing, chewing, chewing. And then, footsteps. Not as heavy stride, smaller, quicker, like something scurrying down the hall. I shut off the music, sat up, listened. The footsteps stopped outside my door. The knob rattled once, twice, and then a voice, high, childlike. "Let me in." I'm hungry. I shoved the dresser against the door and sat with my back against it until dawn. When morning came, there was no sign of anything. The hallway looked the same, my doorknob gleaming innocently in the pale light. But etched into the wood, just above the knob, were 4 long scratches, deep enough to leave splinters on the carpet. Like claws. I told myself I had to leave. That was the only option left. So I packed a bag, stuffed it under my bed, and waited for night. But when the house grew quiet, and his chair scraped once more, something inside me twisted. I couldn't just walk away. Not without knowing the truth. Not without knowing what my dad had really found. So instead of heading for the front door, I crept to the dining room. The smell hit me like a wall. Copper and rot and something sour, like spoiled milk. I gagged, covering my mouth with my sleeve. The door was cracked, just enough for me to slip inside. The lights were dim, shadows crawling across the walls. My grandfather sat at the head of the table, his back straight, his fork moving in that same steady rhythm. Across from him, the grey thing grinned, its black eyes shining wetly. And between them, in the center of the table, was something worse. Something covered by a white cloth, long, human-shaped. My stomach dropped. My hands shook so badly I could barely keep hold of the knob. Grandfather looked up. His pale eyes locked on mine. "You shouldn't be here," he said. The gray thing's grin widened. Its claws drummed on the table, tapping a rhythm that sounded almost like laughter. Grandfather stood, the chair legs screeching against the wood, and then he reached for the cloth. He pulled the cloth back in one sharp motion. The smell hit first. Foul, cloying, so thick I gagged and nearly doubled over. Then the sight. What lay on the table wasn't fresh. It wasn't clean. It was a body, or what was left of one, gray-green with rot, skin sagging like wet paper. The chest cavity was sunken, the stomach carved open, the insides hollowed out, as if scooped clean. But the face, God, the face, was intact, and I recognized it. My father. I don't know how I stayed upright. My vision blurred, my knees shook, but the shock was too sharp to let me collapse. My grandfather's pale eyes didn't leave mine as he set the blood-stained cloth aside. "This is what happens," he said, his voice steady, calm, like he was lecturing me. "When you ask questions you shouldn't." The gray thing giggled, a sickly wet sound, its claws scraping the wood in excitement. I staggered back, my hands searching blindly for the door. You killed him." "No," Grandfather said. "I fed him." The words twisted my stomach, worse than the smell. I wanted to scream, to deny, but I couldn't. The truth was laid out in front of me, rotting on the table. Grandfather stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the floor. "Your father was like you, curious, hungry for answers. So I gave him to it, toward the gray thing, whose black eyes never left me. It's better to feed than to be fed upon." My mouth was dry as dust. "What is that?" His lips curved into a smile, too proud, too reverent. "Family." The gray thing giggled again, but this time its grin dropped, its head twitching toward me like a dog scenting blood. "I want him," it whispered. Grandfather raised a hand, stern. "Not yet." I wrenched the door open and bolted. My legs carried me before thought could. Up the stairs, into my room, the bag still stuffed under the bed. I grabbed it, my hands fumbling, heart thrashing against my ribs. The front door. I just had to make it to the front door. But halfway down the stairs, I stopped. He was waiting at the bottom. Grandfather stood in the entryway, tall and still, his face unreadable. Behind him, the gray thing lingered in the shadows, its grin flashing in the dark. "You can't run," Grandfather said, his voice almost kind. "You belong here." "Just like your father did? Just like your mother does." My blood turned to ice. "Mom knows." His expression darkened. "She understands. She obeys." I shook my head, clutching the bag tight. "No, she's terrified of you. She's terrified of that." "She's alive, isn't she?" His pale eyes glinted. "Alive because she listens." The gray thing slithered forward a step, its limbs too long, its movements twitchy, insect-like. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't think. I swung my bag at Grandfather's head. It hit him square in the face with a dull thud. He didn't even flinch. But the distraction was enough. I darted past, through the lock, and burst out into the cold night. I ran. God, I ran until my lungs were burning. My legs jelly. The streetlights blurred. My ears roared with blood. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of town, until I collapsed on a bench near the all-night gas station, gasping, trembling, drenched in sweat. For the first time in years, I felt air that wasn't poisoned by that house. I thought I was free, but I was wrong. Because when I called my mom the next day, desperate, voice shaking, begging her to leave, she didn't sound scared. She didn't sound relieved. She sounded calm. "You shouldn't have gone," she said softly. "Mom, you have to get out. He killed Dad. He's feeding that thing in the house." "Shh," she cut me off. "Not over the phone." "Mom, please." Her voice dropped, so quiet I could barely hear it. "It's listening." And then she hung up. I didn't go back. I couldn't. Not then. I spent a week sleeping in my car, drifting between motels, trying to convince myself I could stay away. But every night, when I closed my eyes, I saw my father's rotting face. Every night I heard that wet laugh echoing in my ears. And then the dream started. I'd wake in the dark, drenched in sweat, convinced something was standing in the corner of the room. I'd hear claws dragging on the walls, whispering, "Hungry." One morning, I found scratches on the inside of my car door, deep ones. I couldn't escape it, and the guilt ate me alive. My mom was still in that house, still living under his roof. Still obeying his rules, I told myself I had to go back. Not to stay, not to join them, but to get her out. To end it, if I could. So a week later, just after midnight, I pulled into the driveway again. The house loomed tall against the moonlight, every window dark. My chest tightened, my body screaming at me to turn back, but I forced myself forward. The front door was unlocked. The air inside was colder than the winter night. I crept down the hall, my flashlight trembling in my grip. The dining room door was closed, but from behind it came that sound I'd memorized. Wet chewing, steady, rhythmic, and laughter. I pushed the door open. The table was set again. Grandfather at the head, his fork steady. The gray thing opposite, black eyes gleaming. But this time, there was someone else at the table. Someone with her hands folded neatly in her lap. Someone with tears streaking her face. My mother. Grandfather looked up at me and smiled. "She's ready," he said. I froze in the doorway. My flashlight beam wavered across the table, landing on my mother's face. Her eyes were wide and glistening, fixed on me like she was begging me to run, but her hands stayed folded in her lap, obedient, still. Grandfather's pale eyes glowed almost silver in the dim light. "You see?" he said, his voice warm, almost gentle. "She understands her place, and now, so must you." The gray thing giggled, claws tapping on the wood, black eyes darting from me to my mother. Its mouth stretched into that same awful grin, lips splitting at the corners. My chest tightened. My voice came out raw. "Let her go." Grandfather chuckled, shaking his head like I was a child who had asked a foolish question. "Let her go where? Out there?" He gestured vaguely toward the door. "Do you think there's anywhere safe from hunger? She is safe here, boy. Safer than you'll ever be, unless you accept what's offered." My mother's lips parted. She whispered, barely audible, "Don't." But grandfather heard. His hand shot out, slamming flat on the table. The plates rattled, the forks jumped. "Quiet," the gray thing hissed, and the sound made my bones ache. I took a step forward, flashlight shaking. "What is it?" I demanded. "What the hell is that thing?" Grandfather's smile returned, smaller this time, colder. "It is us. It is what's left when flesh gives way to hunger. Bloodline, curse, blessing." His eyes narrowed. "Call it whatever your small mind needs, but it is ours, and it will live as long as we feed it." The gray thing tilted its head, eyes never blinking. "I want him," it whispered again, its voice wet and eager. "Not yet," grandfather said. "Not until he chooses." I swallowed hard, my throat raw. "I'll never choose." The smile on his face didn't falter. They all say that. He stood, unfolding to his full height, taller than I remembered, his shoulders broad, his presence filling the room like a shadow, swallowing light. The smell of rot clung to him, seeping into my lungs until I gagged. "You think you have a choice, boy? You think you can leave and carry this secret into the world?" His glassy eyes bored into me. "No, you either sit at this table or you end up on it." My mother flinched at those words, her hands trembling in her lap. I shook my head, gripping the flashlight tighter, wishing it were a weapon. "You killed Dad." Grandfather's gaze didn't waver. "No, I kept him. He's still here." The gray thing let out a giggle that shook me to my core. My stomach twisted. Rage and terror boiled together inside me until I thought I'd split apart. "I'll never be like you." He stepped toward me, slow, steady. My body screamed to move, but I couldn't. Not until he raised his hand, fingers slick with something dark, and reached for my face. I swung. The flashlight cracked against his temple with a dull thud. He didn't cry out. He didn't stumble. He just stopped, tilting his head slowly, as if curious. My mother gasped, but not at him, at the gray thing. It was standing now, tall and spindly, claws dragging across the tabletop, its grin stretching wider than its head should allow. Its black eyes locked on me, and it whispered, "Hungry." I bolted. Through the hallway, up the stairs, my breath a ragged knife in my chest. Behind me, I heard claws skittering on the floor, faster than footsteps, scraping against the walls as it chased. I burst into my room, slammed the door, shoved the dresser back against it with all the strength I had. The wood rattled under impact a second later. Claws screeched down the other side. I grabbed my bag, tearing through it, fumbling for anything I could use. My hands shook so badly, everything slipped through my fingers. The whisper slid through the cracks in the wood. Hungry! The dresser shook. The doorframe creaked, and then silence. I stood frozen, waiting for the next strike, waiting for it to come bursting through. But nothing came. Minutes stretched into hours. My legs gave out and I slumped against the wall, clutching the flashlight, too scared to close my eyes. Every sound in the house was sharper. The creak of floorboards, the hum of the heater, the faint scratching that seemed to move through the walls themselves. When dawn finally broke, pale light seeping through the blinds, I dared to crack the door. The hallway was empty, no scratches, no sign of claws. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd imagined it all. A nightmare, fevered and wild. But when I stepped into the hall, I saw it, etched deep into the wood outside my door. 4 words. You can't leave. I staggered back, bile burning in my throat. My knees buckled, but I forced myself up, stumbling toward the stairs. The house was silent, too silent. When I reached the dining room, the door was wide open. The table was bare. No plates, no forks, no cloth, no body, no grandfather, no gray thing, and no mom. The house was empty. At least, that's what I thought. Until I heard the sound. A faint scrape, coming from below, from the basement. The basement door stood at the end of the hall, shut tight, paint flaking off the wood. I'd walked past it 1,000 times growing up and never thought much about it. Grandfather always kept it locked, said it was storage. But now I heard the scrape again, slow, deliberate, something heavy being dragged across the concrete. I stood frozen, hand hovering inches from the knob. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to walk out the front door and never look back. But if my mom was down there, if she was alive, I couldn't. The knob was cold when I touched it. Too cold, like ice had seeped through the metal. It shouldn't have turned. It should have been locked, like always. But when I twisted, it clicked open. The smell hit me first. Rot, damp burf, copper tang, sharp enough to sting my nose. I shined my flashlight down the narrow staircase. The beam cut through dust and cobwebs, catching the edge of concrete walls, stained darker than shadow. At the bottom, the air seemed thicker, almost visible, as if something alive was breathing all around me. Step by step, I descended, the wood groaning under my weight. My breath sounded too loud, echoing back at me. The farther I went, the colder it became, until I could see puffs of frost leave my lips. The basement stretched wider than it should have. It didn't feel like it belonged under the house at all. The walls curved strangely, bowing outward as if the earth itself had been hollowed away. And in the center, chained to the wall, was my mother. Her head slumped forward, hair falling over her face. Her wrists were bound in iron cuffs, raw and red where the metal bit skin. "Mom," I whispered, rushing forward. Her head jerked up. Her eyes were wide, frantic, bloodshot. No, you shouldn't be here." Her voice cut off in a choking sob as something stirred in the shadows beyond her. I turned the flashlight, and I saw them. Not one gray thing, dozens. They crouched in the corners, limbs bent wrong, eyes glistening black in the beam. Skin stretched too tight, gray and mottled, their mouths full of teeth that jutted outward like splinters. Some giggled softly, rocking back and forth. Others hissed, claws scraping against the stone floor. And in the middle of them, like a king on his throne, sat Grandfather. He was taller than before. His skin looked stretched thin, pale veins crawling beneath it. His mouth was smeared with red. His glassy eyes gleamed as he spread his arms wide, welcoming me. "You came back," he said, his voice echoing strangely in the tavernous dark. "Just as I knew you would." I couldn't speak. My throat locked. My flashlight trembled in my hand. "You see them now, don't you?" He gestured toward the crouching creatures. "Our blood, our legacy, cast out from flesh but never gone. They need us. They hunger, and we feed them or they take." One of the things giggled, lurching closer on spindly arms and legs. My mother whimpered, trying to shrink against the wall. I raised the flashlight like a weapon, even though it was laughable. My voice came out cracked. "You're insane." Grandfather smiled, wide and wet. "Insane? No. Chosen. We've survived generations because of them. Because of me. And now, because of you." "I'm not part of this." "Oh, but you are." His voice lowered, a growl at the edges. "You always were. Blood remembers." The gray things hissed in unison, claws scraping stone. The sound like nails in my skull. I turned to my mom. "We're getting out." Her eyes welled with tears. "You can't." But I was already fumbling at the cuffs, tugging uselessly against the rusted metal. The gray things stirred, giggling louder, moving closer in twitching jerks. "Stop," Grandfather said. I ignored him, yanking harder, my hands shaking. The cuffs didn't budge. "Stop," he repeated, louder this time. His voice carried weight, like the air itself obeyed him. Still, I pulled. Something shifted behind me. A sudden rush of movement. I spun the flashlight. Too late. One of the creatures lunged. Its claws slashed my arm. Fire exploding through flesh. I cried out, stumbling back, blood slick on my sleeve. The thing shrieked, mouth gaping, teeth snapping inches from my face. Before it could strike again, Grandfather barked. Enough. The creature froze mid-lunge, trembling like a dog held back on a chain. Grandfather rose slowly from his seat, his shadow towering across the walls. His pale eyes bored into me, cold and merciless. "You think you can take her?" he said softly. "You think you can run?" His smile spread, too wide, splitting the corners of his mouth. "You will either kneel, or you will feed them." Behind him, the gray things whispered together, a chorus of hunger. "Hungry, hungry, hungry." I clutched my bleeding arm, breathing ragged, my body pressed against my mother's. Her eyes locked on mine, wide with terror, pleading. "Please," she whispered, "don't fight him, please." But I couldn't stop now. Not after seeing Dad. Not after hearing them. I shook my head. No. Grandfather's face went still. Utterly still. Then his lips curled back, baring teeth slick with blood. The gray things rose as one, and they charged. I don't remember making the decision to run. My body just moved, instinct tearing me away from that hellish circle of things. I grabbed my mother's arm, pulling her, as the gray swarm surged forward, their claws clattering against the floor, their laughter shrieking in my ears. The flashlight beam swung wildly, cutting across faces, stretched too thin, eyes black and bottomless, mouths dripping with hunger. I dragged her toward the stairs. She stumbled, half dead from weakness, her chains rattling as they dragged against her wrists. She was still bound. The realization hit like a hammer. She couldn't leave, not without the key, and Grandfather knew it. His voice bellowed behind me, deeper than a man's, rumbling through the stone. "You cannot escape what you are." I spun back, scanning desperately, the flashlight trembling in my bloodied hand. Grandfather stood calm amid the chaos, his creatures writhing around him like an obedient tide, and in his fist, hanging from a long iron chain, was the key. He dangled it just enough for me to see, a sick smile painted across his face. "If you want her free," he said, "you'll earn it." The creatures hissed louder, circling closer. Their claws scraped sparks against the walls. Their teeth clicked together in a rhythm like chattering bones. My mother's voice was a frantic whisper against my ear. Go without me." No. My throat was raw, my chest burning. Not this time. Grandfather tilted his head, eyes glinting. "Then kneel. Show me you understand, that you accept them. Accept us." The word "us" made bile crawl up my throat. The gray swarm shifted in unison, like a living tide. They crouched low, waiting. All it would take was his word, and they would tear me apart. I tried to think. Fight? Run? Bargain? My blood soaked through my sleeve, dripping onto the concrete. The smell of iron filled the air, and the creatures licked their lips, their whisper growing. "Hungry, hungry, hungry." I turned to my mother. Her face was pale, streaked with dirt and blood, her eyes wide with a desperate kind of knowing. "They don't stop," she whispered. "You feed them once, you never stop." The key glinted in the dim light as Grandfather swung it slowly, taunting me. "Choose." I lunged. My feet pounded against the wet floor as I hurled myself toward him. The swarm shrieked and moved as one, but I was already leaping, arm outstretched, my blood spraying. In an arc, as claws raked my back, I slammed into Grandfather, knocking the chain from his hand. The key clattered across the floor. His skin was clammy, unnaturally firm beneath my grip. He snarled, spittle flying across my face. "You fool!" I didn't let him finish. My fist cracked against his jaw, but it felt like hitting stone. Pain exploded through my knuckles. He barely flinched. The creatures screeched, swarming closer, claws grazing my legs. I dove across the floor, sliding in blood, snatching the key just as one of them slammed into me. Its weight crushed my chest. breath ripping from my lungs. Its mouth gaped open, teeth gnashing inches from my face, its breath hot and rotten. I shoved the flashlight between its jaws and clicked it off. The bulb shattered inside its throat. It convulsed, shrieking, gagging, as smoke poured from its gullet. I rolled free, coughing, clutching the key so tight it dug into my palm. My mother screamed as more claws reached for me. I scrambled to her side, jammed the key into the lock. The cuffs groaned, rust crumbling. The first shackle snapped open. The swarm closed in, giggling, chattering, clawing at the air. The second shackle clicked free. My mother collapsed against me, barely able to stand. "Run!" I shouted, dragging her with every ounce of strength I had left. The staircase loomed above, impossibly far. The swarm shrieked behind us, the sound stabbing into my skull. Hands clawed at my ankles, teeth snapped at my heels. My mother stumbled, nearly falling, but I hauled her up, screaming through the fire in my arm and back. We reached the stairs. I shoved her upward. "Go!" She climbed, sobbing, while I swung the flashlight like a club, cracking it against gray faces that lunged from below. Their flesh split like paper, revealing slick muscle that writhed and healed too quickly. Grandfather's voice thundered again, rattling the walls. "You cannot run from this house. You are mine." We staggered into the hall, my mother collapsing against the wall, gasping for air. My blood left a trail behind us, bright against the wooden floorboards. I turned, slamming the basement door shut, throwing my weight against it. Claws scraped from the other side. Giggles, whispers, the sound of something chewing. I jammed the key into the lock and twisted. The mechanism clicked, the door sealing shut. The sounds dulled, muffled, but they were still there, still hungry. I pressed my forehead against the wood, trembling, soaked in blood and sweat. My mother's voice broke the silence, hoarse and shaking. "We have to go. Now, before he finds another way out." I nodded, chest heaving, but my legs felt like lead. Every nerve screamed with exhaustion. My arm throbbed where the claws had torn it open. My head spun. Still, I staggered toward the front door, dragging her with me. When I opened it, the night air rushed in, cold and clean, burning my lungs with relief. We stepped out onto the porch and froze. The yard was wrong. The grass wasn't grass anymore. It rippled, shifting like water. Shapes moved beneath it. Small, fast, crawling things. The trees leaned inward, their branches writhing, whispering in a language I almost understood. The sky above wasn't black, but gray, filled with pale veins pulsing like the inside of flesh. And standing at the gate, tall and still as a scarecrow, was Grandfather. His eyes glowed pale, watching, waiting. Behind me, the basement door began to rattle. The night wasn't night anymore. The house had bled into something else, something that felt alive. The yard rippled beneath my feet, the ground heaving like the swell of a stomach. My mother clung to my arm, her body trembling, but her eyes fixed on the figure at the gate. Grandfather stood impossibly still. His body was silhouetted against that pulsing, vein-filled sky. His head tilted slightly as though curious. The chain still dangled from his fist, though the key was gone. His lips moved, and though the distance should have swallowed his words, I heard them clear, crawling straight into my head. You are not free. Behind us, the basement door rattled harder. The wood bowed inward as claws raked and hammered. The swarm wanted out. The house wanted out. I pulled my mother forward, feet sinking into the rippling ground. Every step squelched, the grass melting beneath my shoes. Shapes skittered just under the surface, gray fingers pressing up through the soil, mouths opening and closing silently, waiting for us to fall. Don't look down, I told her, though I could barely keep my own eyes from dropping. Grandfather didn't move. He only raised one long, pale hand and beckoned. The basement door exploded. The sound was a shotgun blast. Splinters filled the air, followed by that horrible, screeching laughter. The swarm poured out, gray shapes twisting over one another. A tide of hunger spilling onto the porch. "Run!" I screamed. We bolted across the yard, the ground rising and sinking like waves. My mother nearly went down, her foot caught by a hand clawing up through the dirt. I yanked her free, skin tearing from her ankle as a mouth snapped shut around empty air. The swarm shrieked behind us, closing fast. My lungs burned, my wounds screamed, but I forced my body forward. Grandfather was at the gate, unmoving, waiting. "Why is he just standing there?" my mother gasped. "Because he doesn't have to move," I said, though my voice shook. The swarm surged closer, their claws clicking, their whispers weaving. Together into one word: stay, stay, stay. We reached the gate. My mother stumbled through first. I turned, flashlight raised, ready to swing at the first gray face that lunged too close. But the moment I crossed the threshold, everything stopped. The ground stilled, the whispers died. The swarm froze mid-step, their bodies twitching like broken marionettes. Grandfather smiled. "You can leave," he said softly, "but you'll carry them." The words cut deeper than any claw, because I already knew what he meant. My arm, where they'd torn into me, throbbed. The skin around the wound had gone pale, too pale, veins spider-webbing out from the gashes. It pulsed faintly, in time with the sky above the house. "No," I muttered. "No, no, no." My mother grabbed my face, forcing my eyes to hers. "Listen to me. You are not him. You are not them. Do you hear me?" Behind her, the house loomed, the basement windows glowing faintly, filled with faces pressed against the glass, grinning. Grandfather's voice slid through the air like oil. "You'll come back. You all come back. It's in the blood." I tightened my grip on my mother's hand and pulled her into the road. The air changed instantly. The night sky was just night again, black and endless, dotted with stars. The ground was solid. The wind was cool and smelled of pine and dirt, not rot. I turned back once, just once. The house stood quiet in the distance. No pulsing sky, no gray swarm spilling out the door. Just an old, rotting farmhouse under the moonlight. Grandfather was gone, but I knew he wasn't. We staggered down the road, my vision blurring, my body weak from blood loss. My mother leaned against me, limping, her breath ragged. We didn't speak. Every sound felt like it might shatter us. By the time headlights appeared in the distance, I thought I was hallucinating. The squeal of tires, the slam of a car door, a man's voice shouting. It all felt too real, too sudden. The last thing I remember was falling to my knees on the gravel, clutching my arm, the pale veins crawling further up my skin. I woke in a hospital 2 days later. They told me I'd nearly bled out, that my wounds were severe lacerations from what they guessed was an animal attack. They asked questions, but I gave them nothing. No one would believe me. Not really. My mother was alive. Fragile, broken, but alive. They kept her in another room, away from me, claiming she needed psychiatric evaluation. I overheard a nurse whispering that she hadn't spoken since they found her. But she spoke to me. When they let me see her, she took my hand, her voice hoarse. "They'll wait," she whispered. "They always wait." I didn't ask who she meant. It's been months since then. I was discharged, patched up, given medication for nerve damage in my arm. But the doctors don't see what I see. The veins. They've spread further, up past my shoulder, into my chest. Sometimes, at night, the skin along them twitches, and sometimes I hear them. Faint whispers, just at the edge of hearing. Hungry whispers. I keep the lights on now. I don't sleep much. I'll go near mirrors. And some nights, when it's very quiet, I hear knocking. Not at the door, not on the walls, inside me.